Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Memchet in Masechet Shevuot. We are near the top of Memchet Amud Aleph. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. So, um, we are in the 7th chapter of Shevuot, and we will hopefully finish that chapter today. Tomorrow, we will start and finish the 8th and final chapter of Shevuot, concluding the Masechet and one of the shortest prakim, if not the shortest perek in all of Shas. In our current chapter, we are dealing with rabbinically imposed oaths when someone denies owing anything. And so we begin today with the first word on the 7th line of Memchet Amud Aleph, Amar Lechem B'ni. So this is a quote from our Mishnah, that in our Mishnah, we noted that if a storekeeper gave merchandise to a customer and asked the customer to pay, but the customer says, "What do you mean? I already paid." So then the rabbis say that the customer must swear that in fact he paid. While Rabbi Yehuda says that whoever has the merchandise has the upper hand. So now the Gemara quotes a brisa that explains exactly what Rabbi Yehuda means, because it wasn't clear exactly what Rabbi Yehuda was discussing. So Amar Lechenveni Tainli Bedinar Peiros, etc. That's the quote from our Mishnah. So Tanya, we have a brisa. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, Amasai, when is it that the implication is Amasai of when is it? Take a look in Rashi. Amasai Tzarech Baal Habayas Lishba Bizman Shaperos Tziburin. That when is it that the specifically the customer needs to swear? Continuing on back into the Gemara, Bisman that when the fruit is piled up and lying there, meaning ushnehem orin alehem, both of them claim it, meaning that the storekeeper says, "I haven't given you these fruit yet," and the customer says, "No, you have given me these fruit, and I've even paid you." And the storekeeper says, "Well, if I've given you the fruit, you haven't paid yet," and that's where the situation is. And so, as a result, only in that situation would the customer have to swear. Aval hifshilan b'kupaso la'achorav. But if the customer already put the produce on his back, in his backpack, so amotzi mechavero alav araya, so then the shopkeeper needs to bring evidence in order to take away something, and the customer does not need to swear, because there is no, we have presumptions that we can follow, and as a result, that there's no requirement for an oath. So that is the debate, and of course, even though Rabbi Yehuda says that in that situation you don't need to swear, the Chachamim would say, the Tanna Kama would say, that you do need to swear. Okay, and then our Mishnah ruled a very similar dispute in connection with money changers. Exact same result, where essentially the Chachamim say that the customer swears when the customer says that they haven't gotten, they've already paid the money for which they've gotten the change. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, a money changer doesn't give the change until he gets the money. So why did we need to learn both of these? So Amar Shulchan Tainli. So that's the quote from the Mishnah. Utricha, they're both necessary. Because if I only covered the first case, namely the case of the shopkeeper, maybe it's in that situation that the rabbis, namely the Tanna Kama, would say that you need to swear. Because produce spoils. And we'll see Rashi in a moment. And because it spoils, he's not going to delay. And Rashi explains, "Deperi of the demarkave umimaher chenveni lahashlicham." The storekeeper knows that the fruit are going to spoil, and so as a result, as soon as the customer says that he wants them, he puts them right in the customer's bag, l'tol kelav, right into his bags, shel lokeach, of the buyer, kodem kabbalat hadinar, before he receives the payment in exchange, shelo yakzor, because he doesn't want the person to go back on the deal. Because remember, we saw this all the way back in Bava Metzia. Most eino konos. We say that money does not trigger the acquisition. It is the produce that triggers the acquisition. And so as a result, by putting the produce in the bag right away, he's completed the transaction. And now the customer owes the money and can't back out of it. But when it comes, and so as a result, that's why he's going to have the special incentive to put the money in the bag, to put the produce in the bag of the customer. Most, but when it comes to money, delo markave, it doesn't spoil. Maybe he would agree with Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe he would agree that in fact there's no reason for the money changer to give the change before he gets the original dollars, the original money that's going to be exchanged, and before the customer pays for it. And so as a result, in that situation, even the rabbis would agree that there's no need for the oath, because of course the money changer didn't pay the change before getting the underlying money. So and so therefore we need to, even though we might have already had the first case, we are going to need to teach the second case to tell us that even in the money changing case, the rabbis disagree and say that the customer swears. And if we only had the money changing case, maybe it's only there that Rabbi Yehuda says that the customer doesn't need to change because there's no spoilage. But in the first case where there could be spoilage, maybe they'd agree with the rabbi. Maybe he'd agree with the rabbi. So tzricha, that's why we need to have both arguments. Okay, so that finishes the first two pieces of our Mishnah that we're going to cover today. Now, a third piece. So we said in our Mishnah that just like a woman who notes that she has received a partial payment of her ketubah, that which impairs her ketubah and therefore requires her to swear before she collects. So too, when it comes to orphans, they can't collect an obligation owed by their deceased father, simply with an oath. So miman, who are the orphans trying to collect from? So ilema milova, if you want to say that they're trying to collect from the borrower directly, and of course they were dealing with a situation where there's a document, because just as there's a document with the ketubah, we're talking about a document that the orphans would have as well. So just as and if you want to say that they're collecting from the borrower, avun shaka below shvua, their father, there's nothing wrong with the contract that says that Shlomo owes David $100, so the father has the ability to collect without having to go to the without having to swear. And so too, and so the Gemara asks, you're going to put an oath on the heirs? Of course not. So that can't be the case. So Hachikamer, here's the case that we're talking about. Lo yiparu el b'shvua. When orphans want to collect from other orphans, meaning that we'll call the father of the lender, we'll call the father of the lender. We'll go the lender. Excuse me. We'll call Leo the lender, and borrow, we'll call him Barry. So Leo lends to Barry, the borrower, and now both Leo and Barry have passed away, and so as a result, it's in that situation where the orphans would need to collect using an oath. They would need to swear that in fact they are not aware of their father having been paid at all in connection with this contract. So, and Rav Shmuel, Damri Tarbayu, and now this statement of Rav and Shmuel, which we have seen over the last few days before. We saw it, I think, maybe a day or so ago. We are now going to quote it in context. And so Rav and Shmuel say in this context, Lo Shanu Ela Shemes Malva B'Chaye Alova. That's only true when the lender died during the lifetime of the borrower. And that's because of Almes Lova B'Chaye Malva. But if the borrower died during the lifetime of the lender, Kvar Nischayev Malva Livnei Lova Shvua. Well, the borrower's heirs, if you want to collect from the borrower's heirs, you're going to need to make an oath. And so as a result, the lender himself would need to make an oath. And they have a principle, Rav and Shmuel have a principle, Ve'ein adam mora shvua levanav. When you have to swear in order to collect, we're not going to allow you to have your children inherit that debt. You need to swear. You can't pawn that off on your children and thereby avoid having to swear. And one can understand why, because we're worried that really the father was paid back at least part of the debt. And so as a result, and now the fact that the borrower is no longer alive, he doesn't, his children won't know anything about whether or not it was paid back. And now that the lender has died, his children also won't know. And so as a result, we end up in a situation where no one can swear. And this is what we discussed a day or so ago when we said that, in fact, what happens when both people are chashud for a shvua, that we suspect them of lying, and we had two possibilities. Either the oath would go back to the original source, or the oath would go, in which case the person could potentially collect, or no, the oath goes back to Sinai. So we had Rabbeinu Shebebavel Amru. This is on Mem Zayin Amud Aleph. So I think we covered it either beginning of the day yesterday or the end of the day before. So that the oath returns to Sinai, meaning that nobody gets anything. And Rabbeinu Shebe'aretz Yisrael Amru, and those in the Eretz Yisrael said, Chazra Shvuah L'Mechuyav La. So the one who was originally needed to swear, that's the one who gets it, who gets back the oath. And so as a result, since he's unable to take it, he's going to need to pay. And so that same principle applies here. Here, according to Rav and Shmuel, you effectively, we have an oath that needs to be made, but neither side can make the oath, and so as a result, it goes away, and goes back to Sinai, and essentially we say everything stays in the exact location. So Shlachua Kamei de Rebbe Elazar. So this message was sent to Rebbe Elazar. Shvuazo Mativa. How important is this oath that we're effectively saying, because you can't make, means that the children are going to not be able to collect on their father's debt, on the debt that their father, on the money that the father loaned to somebody else. So Shalach Lahu, so Rebbe Elazar sent back to them, Yorshin Nishban Shvuas Yorshin V'Notlin. Disagreeing with Rav and Shmuel, he says that actually, according to Rebbe Elazar, the heirs may swear the oath of heirs and collect. And of course, as we saw back again, beginning of the day yesterday, at top of Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, we saw that who were the Rabbeinu Shebebavel? That was Rav and Shmuel. And who were the Rabbeinu Shebe'eretz Yisrael? That was Rabbi Abba. And so essentially, Rebbe Elazar is effectively like Rabbi Abba in saying that that the oath can go on the one who swears, as Rashi says, Mativa. So let's take a look at Mativa. It's 1, 2, 3. It's about a little bit before midway down in the Rashi. Mativa lehavkia mamonam. What is it? How strong is it for them to collect? And we can continue with Agos Habach. Yorshim nishbain im ein yicholon lishba ota shvua. How strong is it that they are able to collect if they're not able to swear the original oath? Mamish yishbeush, that they're not able to swear the original oath that their father was going to swear. So yishbeu shvuas yorshin. So in that case, The answer that Rebbe Lazar gives back is that no, they can swear the oath of heirs. Kagon Shvua Shelo Pakadnu, that our father didn't tell us. Lo Pakadnu Abba Benotlan, and then they'd be able to take the payment. So we see that again, Rabbi Lazar disagrees with Rav and Shmuel, saying, no, you can inherit an oath, and you can, and those heirs can swear that they were not aware of anything that their father said to the contrary, that this debt is no longer valid. And after all, they have a document that says that Barry the borrower borrowed the money from their father, Leo. Okay, so Shlachua b'mei Rabbi Ami. So this request was sent in the days of Rabbi Ami. So Amar Kulei Hai Shalchi La Ba'azle. Why do you keep asking the same question? If we had found a reasoning to say, like presumably Rav and Shmuel, Milo Shalchinu Lo, wouldn't we have sent it to you? Of course we would have. So Ella Amar Rabbi Ami. Since you asked us the question about whether or not heirs can inherit a debt for which an oath is due, so that we'll say something. Amad bidin umeis, if in fact Leo the lender took Barry the borrower to court and was about to make an oath to make him pay. So now the lender becomes. I'm sorry, he was not going to take Barry to court. He took Barry's orphans to court. So my apologies. So so he already owes the Barry's heirs an oath. So, and now, unfortunately, Leo, the lender, passes away. And so in that situation, that's where we're going to limit Rav and Shmuel's statement. As Rashi says, Amad Bedin, Shahotzi Shtar Zeh Al Yitzmei Loveh. Right? Leo, the lender, takes out the document that shows that Barry, the borrower, borrowed the money. And he says to the orphans, V'amru lo Beis Din, and now the Beis Din says to him, Hishva v'tol, you can swear and take. And so once that happens, so then that's where we're going to apply Rav and Shmuel. Lo ama b'din umeis, but if in fact he has not yet gone to court and stood in judgment, Yorshin Nishban Shvuos Yorshin Benotlin, the heirs can swear the oath of heirs and collect the debt. So Maskif lo Rav Nachman says, 1 second, that doesn't make any sense to me. Atu beidina ka mechayve leishua. Is it the court that is actually triggering the obligation of the oath? No, the court is having the person swear. But what causes the need to swear, me'idnin the shakav lova. It's the moment that the borrower dies. Ichayev le malva livnei lova shvua. That's when the lender automatically became obligated to swear. And so they disagreeing with what Rabbi Ami says. He says basically we're going to apply Rav and Shmuel whenever Rav and Shmuel apply. Ela Amar of Nachman, Isa de Rav Shmuel. Isa, if you're going to hold like Rav and Shmuel, well then you need to hold like them, as Rashi says. The Ein Adam Morish Shvuah Lebanav, that if you're going to say that the halacha is like Rav and Shmuel, that you cannot inherit a debt that is only collectible with an oath, well then, Isay, you should hold like him, Bain Amar Bedin, whether the lender was already in court and needed to swear or not, Bain Shelo Amar Bedin, or even if the lender never took the borrower's heirs to court and so was never subject to the loan. Either you always apply Rav and Shmuel or not. And Elasa, and if you're not going to hold like Rav and Shmuel, Lasa, so then don't hold like Rav and Shmuel. So 1 second, Alma Misapkale, this seems to suggest that Rav Nachman was uncertain about whether or not Rav and Shmuel were correct. But Bahama Rav Yosef Bar Manyumi, Avad Rav Nachman Uvda Yachloku, that when Rav Nachman actually ruled in a case, he held Yachloku. Now, we had back on Mem Zayin, so I guess, again, sometime during the day, either yesterday or the day before, we noted this debate between whether or not our language in our Mishnah should be reversed. And we actually reverse the language, and we say that Rabbi Yossi says that we split the money, and Rabbi Meir's the opinion that says we do not. And so as a result, when Rav Nachman ruled, he ruled like Rabbi Yossi, that we split the money equally in this kind of case where there's an uncertainty. So how come we're now saying that Rav Nachman was uncertain about Rav and Shmuel? It seems clear that he does not hold like Rav and Shmuel. So look, L'dvarav de Rabbi Meir Kamer, he was speaking in the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Again, Rabbi Meir, based on our reversing of the Mishnah, says that the oath returns to the place. And remember, we had, when it came to what does that mean, that the oath returns to its source, it either means, according to Rav and Shmuel, that it returns to Har Sinai, and therefore no one collects anything, or it means it returns to the original person to who is going to be obligated to swear, and that person loses out. So those were the two possibilities. And so as a result, when it comes to Rebbe Meir, it's not necessarily clear whether we hold like Rav and Shmuel, who were the rulers in, who were the referenced leaders in Bavel, or whether we hold like Rabbi Abba, who was the referenced leader in Eretz Yisrael. But in any event, the bottom line is that when it comes to Rav Nachman himself, he holds like Rabbi Yossi. Again, this is based on the switch that we made on Mem Zayin Amud Aleph. Okay, so now we're going to, again, let's back up and let's just explain where we are. So we are, first of all, in terms of where we are in the Gemara, we are on the fourth Y line on Memchet Amud Aleph. Massive, the second word on the line, Massive Rav Oshia. So that's where we're up to. And where are we up to from the Gemara's perspective? We have this statement of Rav and Shmuel. Rav and Shmuel say that if Leo, the lender, lends money to Barry, the borrower, and unfortunately Barry's children, Barry passes away, and so now Leo needs to collect from Barry's heirs, so he can only do so by swearing. But if now Leo passes away, so now it's his heirs that are going to try and collect from Barry's heirs. So according to Rav and Shmuel, that is not a loan, that is not an asset that can be inherited, because those children don't have the ability to make the same oath that the father made. They don't know whether or not their father was repaid at all by Barry the borrower. They don't know any of their father's business, and so as a result, they would not be able to make that oath, and so as a result, they lose out on the ability to collect. So the bottom, so according to Rav and Shmuel, it's very important that if one of your debtors passes away, you need to make sure to collect immediately from the heirs so that you can make the oath that you were not paid back at all. Even if you have a document that says that you were owed the full amount, you're not going to be able to collect it unless you make an oath. And your children, according to Rav and Shmuel, would not be able to make the oath if after May Esrim you were to pass away and try and collect, and your heirs were to try and collect from the creditor, from the debtor's heirs. So that's an important principle that we've learned so far. So we're now going to ask a series of questions on the ruling of Rav and Shmuel. So we start by asking a question from Rav Oshia. So Massive Rav Oshia asks, Mesa, if a woman dies, and Rashi tells us what the situation is. Mesa almana, a widow, shelo gavasa ksubasa, who has not collected her ksuba. So if a widow dies, she's supposed to get her ksuba, but she hasn't yet collected it. Yorsha mazkirin es ksubasa at esrim v'chamesh shanim. They are allowed, her heirs are allowed to collect it for 25 years, meaning 25 years not from her death, but from his death. Misham, as Rashi says, 2 lines down from that previous Rashi. We're now 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, about 15 lines up in the Rashi, ad esrim v'chamesh shanim, mishemes ba'ala, from the date that her husband dies. V'im avru kav shanim, but if the 25 years pass, the lo tvuah, and they haven't yet collected hifsidua, they're going to lose their ability to collect. And we'll skip down a couple of lines in the Rashi. Va'al karchach, about 5 lines down from that. Va'al karchach b'shvuas yorshin yigvua min ha'yisomim. And so the implication is that certainly these heirs can just swear the oath of heirs, namely that they never heard anything about this money being previously collected from their parent. And aval gav demes lova b'chaye malva. And so even though the borrower, namely the husband, died, or the one who owes the money, died during the life of the lova, of the malva, the life of the lender, namely the wife, shehu meit b'chayeha, because the husband died in the lifetime of the wife, nischayva shvua liyorshin. And so as a result, she would have been liable to swear to his heirs, and yet her heirs are able to still collect the ksuba. Alma horisha shvua liyarsheha. So we see that in fact she's able to cause her children to inherit a debt, even though that debt was only collectible with an oath by her. And so as a result, this shows that Rav and Shmuel are incorrect. So no, not necessarily, the Gemara explains. And we could talk about the following case. Shenishba umesa. We're dealing with a situation where she did take the oath, but then unfortunately she passed away before she was able to collect. And so as a result, her children still want to collect. Okay, so our second challenge now of Rav and Shmuel, Tashma Nasa Rishona Umesa. This is so that first one was a Mishnah in Ketubot, was a Ketubot Kuf Dalid. Now we go back to Daf Tzadi in Ketubot, and so. And here's what the Mishnah there says. Nasa Rishona, if you marry a first wife, Umesa, and she dies. Nasa Shniya Umes, and then she marries a second wife and she dies. I'm sorry. And then marries a second wife, Umes who? And he dies now. So again, wife number one died first. Then wife number two was married, and now the man dies. Shniya, the Yorsha, Kodmin Liyorshe Arishona. The heirs, the wife, the second wife, and her heirs take precedence over the heirs of the first wife, meaning in terms of collecting the ketubah from the estate. And that makes perfect sense because she's entitled to the ketubah, whereas the first wife died first, and so they're only entitled to any leftover, to a share in any leftover property as heirs, as heirs. And so as a result, and again, we see that the second wife's heirs have the ability to collect, because even though the husband died, and the second wife would have needed to swear to collect from the husband's heirs, and yet we allow her heirs to also collect. So doesn't that again show that a debt that can only be collected with an oath does have the possibility of being inherited? Again, contradicting what Rav and Shmuel say. Again, no, again, we could say that the situation where we reference the heirs of the second wife, we're talking about heirs of the second wife where the second wife took the oath. And so that's why they're able to collect. Tashma, well, 1 second. What about on Pei Vavam Abet in Ksubos? Because there we have a Mishnah that says, Aval Yorshav. But when it comes to his heirs, mashbiin, they have the ability to cause others to swear. Ota, they have the ability to cause the wife to swear, the widow to swear. Ve'es yorsheha, and they have the ability to cause her heirs to swear. Ve'es haban birshusa, and those who will come on her authority. Well, here clearly we're not talking about where she's already made an oath, because it's specifically saying that the heirs can cause the widow to make an oath. So Amar Rav Shemaya, so Rav Shemaya explains, Litzdadin Katani. No, you have to distinguish between these two cases. It's actually talking about two situations. Osa ba'almana. When it comes to the wife and her ability to collect, it doesn't make a difference whether she's a divorcee or she's a widow. She has the ability to collect both from the husband, obviously, but certainly from the husband's heirs with taking a Shevuot, with taking an oath. But the Yorsha, when it comes to the husband, to her heirs, we're not talking about a situation of where the husband has passed away. We're dealing a situation where the debt was originally due to Gerusha, to the fact that the husband divorced his wife. And so as a result, we're not talking about a situation where the husband predeceases the wife, and therefore the heirs are inheriting a debt that is only collected through an oath, but rather the wife predeceases her husband, namely her ex-husband. And so as a result, the heirs inherited the oath that would not have needed inherited a debt that would not have needed an oath. And so as a result, now they have the ability to swear the oath of heirs and collect. And so as a result, this is totally consistent with Rav and Shmuel. So again, third and final challenge. Masav Rav Nosson Bar Hoshea. Rav Nosson Bar Hoshea challenges it from the following brisa. Yafa koach haben mikoach ha'av, that sometimes a son's power to collect is stronger than the father's power to collect on his own. Shabein gova ben shvua, ben b'shvua, ben shelo b'shvua, because a son can collect sometimes with an oath and sometimes without an oath. V'ha'av eina gova ela b'shvua, whereas a father, when he's alive, can only collect with an oath. So Hechidami, what case are we talking about? Isn't the case that we're talking about Demes Lova B'chaye Malva, where the borrower died in the lifetime of the lender, and so as a result, the father would need to swear the Katani, and yet we learn the Brisa says Shabein Gova Ben B'Shvua Ben Shelo B'Shvua, and the son can collect whether with a Shvua or without a Shvua. So B'Shvua, when it says with a Shvua, Shvua is Yorshin. That's where they inherit the debt before the borrower has died, and so as a result, their father didn't need to swear, but they do need to swear. But when it comes to Shelo B'Shvua, and they can collect without an oath, that's Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. That's like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in our Mishnah, who says that if the father said at the time of his death that the loan is unpaid, the son can collect it without an oath of heirs, and so that's even stronger when he's collecting from the heirs than the father would be, because the father, if he were to collect from the heirs directly, he would need to swear. And so as a result, we're dealing with a situation where the borrower died during the lender's lifetime, and the Brisa says that if the lender then dies, his heirs can collect the debt based on the basis, of the oath of heirs, and maybe even with no oath. So as a result, isn't this contradicting Rav and Shmuel? So Amar Rav Yosef, Hamani Beis Shammai. No, you have to understand, this is Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai says, the Amri Shtar HaOmid L'Gavos K'Gavui Dummy, that anytime you have a contract that is ready to be collected, it's as if the money is already in the hands of the creditor. And so as a result, it is not effectively a collection situation. It's just putting the things right in the right property. And so as a result, even if the borrower died first, the heirs of the lender can collect on the document without swearing, because it's as if the money is already in their hands. And so as a result, they're just trying to get the money that is already effectively theirs. So, all right, so that the Gemara now shares, we're not yet done with Rav and Shmuel, but now the Gemara shares a series of incidents in connection with Rav and Shmuel's rule. So Ikla Rav Nachman l'Sura. Rav Nachman would travel to Surah. Ul Gabe Rav Chisda v'Rabba bar Rav Huna. And Rav Chisda and Rabba bar Rav Huna went to meet him. And Amrulay, and they said to him, Lesi Mar Nakra Lahad Rav Shmuel. Let's uproot what Rav and Shmuel said, because again, as you remember, a lot of rabbis have said that they don't understand necessarily the basis for this rule. So Amr Lahu, he said to them, no, ikapale asai kol hani parse. I traveled all this distance, l'me'ekra halahad Rav Shmuel, just to uproot Rav and Shmuel. No, I'm not prepared to do that. But we can rule that we aren't going to add to the situations. So again, the situation of Rav and Shmuel is where a borrower dies in the lifetime of the lender, and now the lender has also died, and so we say that the lender's heirs do not have the ability to collect because they are unable to swear the oath that their father swore, and their father was already due to make the oath, and we don't allow a debt that is subject to an oath to be inherited. And so but now we're going to say we're going to limit the situation to that case. So Kagon Mai, what's an example of a case that isn't that case where someone might inherit a right to funds that is subject to an oath? Dama Rav Papa, it's like the situation of Rav Papa. Hapogim eshtaro. If you have a document and you admit that the document was partially paid, well, then you have to swear that the rest of it was unpaid in order to be able to collect. Umes, and now if such a person were to die, Yorshin Nishba and Shvuos Yorshin V'Notlin, they have the ability to take the oath of heirs and collect. They can collect the outstanding amount based on an oath of heirs, and that's it, even though, again, this is a right, a property right, a monetary right that is being inherited, even though it could only be collected with an oath. And so on a literal basis, it seems to be inconsistent with Rav and Shmuel, but because we're limiting Rav and Shmuel to a classic borrower and heirs lender-borrower situation where the lender is trying to collect from the borrower's heirs, and that's the only situation where we're going to apply Rav and Shmuel. We're not going to apply Rav and Shmuel to a situation where the collection is happening from the original borrower, and it's just a situation where the lender has diminished the document, that the note that the lender lent on and is trying to use to collect, by saying that it was partially repaid. So Ahu Deshachev Vishavak Arva. So there was a borrower who died during the lifetime of the lender, but he had a guarantor. Savara Papa Lamemar Hanami Delolosif Allahu. And so as a result, Rav Papa thought, maybe we should say, just like Rav Nachman said, let's not expand Rav and Shmuel's ruling, and let's allow the orphan, the lender's orphans to collect from the guarantor. So Amar Le Rav Huna Braid Rav Yoshua Rav Papa. So Rav Huna responded, Atu Arava La Basar Yasme Azil. But 1 second. What's going to happen if we allow the guarantor to the lender's heirs to collect from the guarantor? The guarantor is going to go to the borrower's heirs, and now the guarantor wasn't due an oath, never was required to swear to the parent, and so as a result, he can just go ahead and collect from the orphans. And so we're going to end up allowing collection from the orphans. That is exactly what Rav and Shmuel were trying to prevent. So as a result, no, this is not a situation that's different from Rav and Shmuel. It's the same situation as Rav and Shmuel. So again, another question. So one, a situation where the lender, when the lender died, it wasn't the lender's children who were trying to collect from the borrower's children, but rather it was the lender's children who were collecting. It was the lender's brother who was collecting from the borrower's children. And so again, here Rav Papa, here Rami Bar Chama, Sava Rami Bar Chama, Lamemar, Hanami Delo Losif. Maybe we should say that this is also a situation where we can apply Rav Nachman's rule of not expanding the ruling of Rav and Shmuel. So Amar Le Rava said back to him, no. Mali shalo pakdani abba. What's the difference between my father didn't tell me, umali shalo pakdani achi, and my brother didn't tell me? What the heir of the lender would need to swear is the exact same thing, and we're not going to allow that oath to be sworn in this situation. And so therefore, we're going to say that in fact, this situation is also covered by Rav and Shmuel. And so we have all the situations when it's a situation where the borrower died before the lender, we are not going to allow collection based on Rav and Shmuel. But when it's something else, like when the lender says that his document is not perfect because the debt was partially paid, there we will allow the lender's heirs to continue to collect despite the fact that their father would have needed to make an oath. Okay, so how do we rule? So Amar Rav Chama says, Hashta delo itmar hilchasa. Here we haven't actually had a definitive statement. Lo Rav Shmuel, below Rabbi Elazar, neither like Rav and Shmuel nor like Rabbi Elazar. So hi dayane de Avid Krav u'Shmuel Avid. So if a judge were to rule like Rav and Shmuel, they've ruled, and it's a final ruling. De Avid Rabbi Elazar Avid, and if they rule like Rabbi Elazar, also they've done a final ruling, and it's fine. There's nothing that should be undone. Rav Papa Haishtari de Yasmi, and so as a result, Rav Papa says when it comes to a contract of orphans, Lo mikra karinanle. We will not tear that up, even if they're trying to, meaning if the orphans are trying to collect from a borrower's orphans. So they're not just trying to collect from a borrower, but if they're collecting from a borrower, they're able to do so. But they're trying to collect from the borrower's orphans. And of course, we're dealing with a situation where the lender died after the death of the borrower. And so Lo mikra karinan lay, we're not going to tear up that contract. Below agbuye magbinan lay bay, but we also won't let the orphans use it to collect. Agbuye lo magbinan lay, we're not going to let them collect. Why? Because Dilma Sphira Lan Karav Shmuel, because maybe we should rule like Rav and Shmuel. Umikra lo Karinan like, and we are not going to tear up the document. Dahai Dayana da Avid Rabbi Elazar Avid, because if a judge were to rule like Rabbi Elazar, it's a valid ruling. So Ahu Dayana da Avid Rabbi Elazar. Indeed, there was a judge that ruled like Rabbi Elazar. Havid Sorbet Mirabana b'maseh, and there was a young rabbi in that town, and Amrlay, Isina Egarta Mimar Rabba. I'm going to bring a letter from Israel that says that you're delays Hilchos like Rabbi Elazar, that says that the halacha is not like Rabbi Elazar. So Amrlay, Lechitaisi, go ahead and bring it. Meaning, my ruling is a valid ruling, and Asalakame de Rav Chama, and it came in front of Rav Chama. Amrlay Hadayana de Avid Rabbi Elazar Avid. As I said, a judge who rules like Rabbi Elazar, in fact, has ruled a valid ruling. And so as a result, that is where the Gemara concludes its discussion. It does seem like we paskin like Rav and Shmuel, that in fact, if you inherit a contract that can only be collected on with a Shevuot, you are not going to be able to collect it. Okay, so back to our Mishnah. And near the end of the Mishnah, we said that certain parties must swear even when no claim is made against them. So, atu b'shuftani askinan, are we dealing with fools? Why would anybody ever say that somebody needs to swear when nobody's even made a claim against them? So, Hakikamer, no, what the Mishnah is trying to say is the following. The Elu Nishban Shalo Batanas Bari. Here are the people who need to swear when the claim against them is not a definitive claim. It's not, I know you owe me X, Ela Batanas Shema, but rather it's a possible claim. It's an uncertain claim. It's a claim that says, I think you owe me X. I'm not 100% sure, but I think you owe me X. So we then say hashutafin, v'harisin. We then list a whole bunch of people who are subject to this oath. And the end of that list is a ben bias, is somebody in the household. So what exactly does that mean? So the Gemara cites a brisa to clarify. Tana, ben bias sha'amru, shalo nichnas v'yotzei v'raglav. The ben bias that we're talking about is not, lo shenichnas v'yotzei v'raglav, is not the one who just goes in and out of the property, meaning it's not just somebody who's looking over the property. Ella machnis lo poelin, but rather we're dealing with somebody who's managing the property. He's going to hire the workers, umotzi lo poelin, and he's going to let the workers go at the end of the season. Machnis lo peros, he's going to buy the produce for the estate, umotzi lo peros, and he's going to sell the produce for the estate. And so why is it that such a person is going to be subject to swearing, even though the person who's claiming against them is not making any kind of definitive claim? Umayshna hani, why is that case different, that we're going to make this person swear? Mishum demora bo hetera, because as Rashi says, Mishum demora bo hetera, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wide line at the bottom of Rashi, last words on the line, going into the 7th line. Mishum demora bo hetera, because they're going to justify themselves. They are so busy doing all the work for the properties of the estate that they are going to say, you know what, I'm entitled to something. And because of that, we're going to say that they need to swear. So again, our Mishnah said that all these people need to swear. Amar of Yosef bar Manyumi, Amar of Nachman, v'hu sheyesh tana benaihu shtei kesef. That the person needs to swear, even though the claim against them is not a definitive claim. We are dealing with a situation where there is a claim of at least 2 silver mohs. And if that sounds familiar, that's because all the way back when we were talking about moda b'miktsas, we said that there needs to be a claim of 2 silver mohs and a denial of partial of that amount. And that was the view of Shmuel, where Rav said that the total of the amount of the denial needs to be 2 silver mohs. But the point is, and Rashi makes this point clearly, take a look at the next Rashi, it's now 7th line down in the wide lines of Rashi at the bottom of Memchet Amabed. Sheyesh tana b'neihem shtei kesef, shezet tano shema, akavta mishali shtei kesef, that the possible claim is that, listen, I think maybe you took 2 silver coins from me, v'zem moda. And now the other person, the person that we're talking about, whether it's a partner, a sharecropper, etc., all the other categories in our Mishnah, the other person admits, b'miktsas. He admits to a partial amount. The krova he l'shvuah d'oraisa, because this is very similar to a biblical oath. Now, the biblical oath requires a definitive claim. I know that you owe me 2 silver coins. And as a result, and then the person says, no, I only owe you a pruta. But here, the person says, I think you owe me 2 silver coins. And the person says, I owe you a pruta. And so as a result, given the similarity, we're going to say that this person needs to, and the closeness of this situation to a biblical oath, but because the person who made the original claim only was uncertain about it, we're going to say that it's a rabbinic oath in that situation. But in an ordinary situation, meaning if I claim again, if you and I are partners in a deal, and I say I want you to swear for me that you don't owe me anything extra and that you haven't taken any money because I think you might have, and you say, no, I didn't take anything, you would not be liable to an oath because it's only in a situation of a partial admission that we're going to say this. Okay. All right. So back into the Gemara. So come on, who is this like? Well, it certainly sounds like Shmuel. It sounds like Shmuel because Shmuel was the one who again said that the claim needs to be 2 silver coins, but the amount of the denial can be less than 2 silver mohs. And so Doesn't that show a proof to Shmuel? No, but Tani Rabbi Chia l'siyuye l'Rav. But 1 second, Rabbi Chia taught a brisa that shows that Rav is the correct position. And so as a result, don't we need to have a denial of Tumah? So Ema Kefiras Tana. Karav. So say that when we talked about the claim, it means that it's denial of a claim. When it says V'hu sheyesh Tana b'nai hu shtei kesef, it should be saying V'hu sheyesh Kefiras Tana b'nai hu shtei kesef. And so as a result, Karav, and that's exactly like Rav. Okay, so now the next piece in our Mishnah noted Chalku HaShutafin v'Harisin. If the partners already divided their property, so then you no longer have the ability to force the other person to swear if you don't have a definite claim. So Ibailahu, they asked the question, Malagalgal b'derabanan. What's the story about making somebody swear these oaths about a no longer existing partnership in due to a rabbinic oath as opposed to a biblical oath? It's clear that if I'm going to make you swear a biblical oath, so in addition to a partnership that we have now dissolved, you borrowed money from me and you admit to owing half of the amount that I asked from you. So then because you're required to make that biblical oath, we're also going to put upon you an oath with respect to our closed partnership that I'm going to make you swear, saying that I think you owe me some of the more than what you do, and you say, yes, I owe you a little bit, but I don't owe you anything near what you potentially have claimed against me. And again, in that situation, we're going to say that because ordinarily, if that was our only relationship, you would not have to swear because I'm not coming to you with a definitive claim. I'm coming to you with a possible claim, and you have admitted, but you didn't. You could have said you owed nothing, and you would have not had to do anything. So any admission to me is essentially like returning a lost object, and so you're just being kind to me by admitting what you've done. And so as a result, I would not be able to force you to swear. But now, once I make you swear on a biblical oath, well, now I'll make you swear on this as well. But does that also apply with respect to a rabbinic oath? So come and see. We're going to try and prove that, in fact, yes, it is the case. So Tashma, Lava Himeno Erev Shvius. If you borrow money from somebody the year before the Shemitah year, and so as a result, that debt is going to be ended at the end of the Shemitah year. L'motzei Shvius, when the Shemitah year is done, Nasalo Shutaf O Aris, and at that point, they became partners or sharecroppers. And so as a result, I might, and now the question is, we say that the ein megalgalin. We're not going to say that an oath regarding the loan is somehow going to impact and make us swear. We're not going to make the oath regarding the loan based on the rabbinic oath of the partnership or the sharecropper. Why is it that we're not going to make you swear about the borrowing relationship? Time of delava hemena erev shvius, because you borrowed the money before Shvita, before the Shvius year, and now it's after Shmita. V'da'asya Shvius afkaete, and so Shvius came and canceled the debt. So that's why Hashar Shnei Shevuot. But if in fact this story had happened in the in any other year, and so as a result, it was in the third year that you borrow the money, and in the fifth year that we became partners, I would be able to make you swear, even though the oath that I'm having you swear from Megalgalin, that even though you denied fully the loan, because I'm making you swear a rabbinic oath with respect to our partnership, I'm going to make you swear a rabbinic oath that you don't owe me any money. We'll just include that based on our debt relationship. So we'll just include that in the oath that we make you swear. So lo tema, no, that maybe not. Lo tema, you don't have to necessarily say that. I'm sorry, lo tema, hashar shnei shavua megalglin. Don't say that when it comes to the other years we would apply it. Ela ema, what is it trying to distinguish between by saying the loan is before Shemitah and the business relationship is after Shemitah? Ela ema nasa lo shutav o aris erev shvius. Ulamotzi shvius lazeh lova hamena, and only that the situation is where you entered the partnership or sharecropper relationship before Shemitah. And then after Shemitah, you borrow the money. So in that situation, megalgalin. And therefore, in that situation, we're going to say that you have to, that we do apply the oath. But the oath that we are applying is the other direction. We're dealing with a situation where the business relationship was over. And so as a result, you are no longer subject to a rabbinic oath with respect to the business relationship. And the oath that we're talking about is the oath is where now you were moda b'miktsas with respect to the loan. And so because you were moda b'miktsas with respect to the loan, and now you have to swear a biblical oath with respect to that, we're going to make you swear a rabbinic oath, or we're going to make you swear in a megalgalin. We're going to add to the oath and have you also swear about the fact that you didn't take any money in connection with our partnership or sharecropper that you weren't entitled to. So 1 second, though, you can't give that interpretation of the of that brisa, because habahedya katani law, because the end of that brisa specifically says nasa lo shutav o aris erev shvius ulamotzi shvius lava himena megalgalin, that if you in fact you did do the partnership on the eve of Shvius, and then you borrow the money after the Shemitah year, and now you somebody was doing a partial admission, and now you want to say that they owe you money from the partnership that was already concluded, even though ordinarily we wouldn't make you swear about that partnership. We're going to say that because you have to owe the biblical oath of moda b'miktsas, we're going to make you swear in connection with the partnership as well. So the brisa specifically tells us this rule that you wanted to try and derive from the first part. So it can't be that the first part is teaching us that lesson. So shmamina megalgalin dirabanan shmamina. So as a result, in fact, we can derive from the first part of this brisa the fact that even when an oath that's required for somebody is only a rabbinic oath, namely the oath associated with a partner that admits that is alleged to have stolen something when the partners are still part of the partnership, and then and now that partner has to swear in that situation a rabbinic oath. So in that situation, we will add to that other oaths that they may have needed to swear as well. So finally, Amar Rav Huna qualifies this. L'kol megalgalin, we're going to do any kind of rabbinic oath. We're going to cause any oath, whether rabbinic or biblical, we will cause to make you swear other oaths, chutz misacher she'ein megalgalin, except for a hired worker. Now remember, the hired worker, in fact, Rashi helps us out, l'kol megalgalin, al yedei kol shvuah d'Rabbanan megalgalin. We are going to make any rabbinic oath cause you to make an additional oath with respect to some other claim that has been made against you. The only exception is chutz me'al yad shvuas sacher, except for where the employee needs to swear. She'ein megalgalin olav. In that situation, we are not going to, this is the top Rashi on Mem Tet Amud Aleph. In that situation, we're not going to require another oath. Al yedei shvuah acheret. As a result, to make him swear something else. Lefi shehi atzma, because that oath, the oath that we make a hired worker swear, Eina min adin. There's no real requirement to make it, el lahapis, but rather it's all done to appease daito shel balabais, to make the employer feel better about the fact that he's going to have to pay up. That this way he knows he didn't accidentally pay this worker before him. Kedamar b'chol nishban, as we saw back on Mem Hey Amud Aleph, a couple of days ago. So as a result, over the weekend, I think. So the point is that that is the one oath where we won't make the person swear. Rav Chisda said something very, very similar. L'kol ein makilin. For all kinds of oaths, we are not going to be lenient. Chutz misachero de makilin. Except for the hired worker, where we are lenient. So my benayu, what's the difference between these two? Ika benayu lift toachlo, that the difference between them is whether or not we open the door. Meaning, what does that mean? Let's take a look at Rashi. Last Rashi in the Perek, fourth of line, last line of the Y lines at the top of Rashi on Mem Tet Amud Aleph. Lift toachlo im lo ta'an hatoveya shigalgalu alav, that if the claimant never asks for the defendant to also swear about some other topic, Yiftechulo, according to Rav Huna, when we will open the door for him. Based in Gilgal, Lamanda Amar Megalgalin. According to Rav Huna, we will say, hey, you have also claimed X, Y, and Z, and so we're going to make the defendant also swear in connection with X, Y, and Z. But Vilamanda Amar Ein Makilin, but according to Rav Chisda, who says that we aren't lenient, Imtan Gilgal. If the plaintiff actually makes the claim and asks for the oath to be expanded, well, then we'll expand the oath. Ein Makilin alav Ella Megalgalin. And when it comes to not being lenient, we're not going to Imtan Gilgal Ein Makilin alav Ella Megalgalin. If the claimant says that he wants the defendant to make an additional oath because he's already required to make one oath, and so we're going to expand the oath to cover other topics, well, then we're going to expand the oath. V'im lo tano, but if in fact the plaintiff does not make a claim, ein lanu liftoach lo, then we're not going to make the suggestion for him, and so that's the difference between Rav Huna and Rav Chisda. Okay, so, and finally, Shvius Mishametes, we say at the end that not only does the Shemitah year end liability for debts, but it also ends liability from oaths. How do I know this? So, Amar Rav Gidol, Amar Rav, Amar Krav, V'zet Dvar HaShemitah. This is the literal translation is this is the story, this is the matter, this is the ruling of the cancellation. This is in Dvarim Perek Tezvav Pasuk Bet, and that's the pasuk that talks and tells us that loans after the Shemitah year are going to be canceled. But it uses the term Dvar, Va'afilu Dibor Mishametes, that not only is the loan canceled, but even the speech is canceled, even the words, namely the words of an oath. So Hadran Alach Kol Nishban, Hadran Alach Kol Nishban, Hadran Alach Kol Nishban. So we have now finished the second to last chapter of Masechah Shavuos. We will, God willing, finish the final chapter. My apologies for not scrolling. We will finish the final chapter of Masechah Shavuos and also the entire Masechah Shavuos, God willing, tomorrow. So don't miss tomorrow's daf when we will learn, basically one of the shortest prakim in all of Shas, and it also will lead to the completion of the Masechet. So stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.